politics to the world of business. Every weekday on Bloomberg TV and radio, hosts Joe Matthew and Keely Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis from and about politics' biggest power players.
The president has been clear that is non-negotiable.
I mean, this is going to be an ugly, ugly year.
Balance of Power, live around the world every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television and Radio. Context changes everything.
Markets are challenged, would be the word. You've got a four-day rally. It's just taking a pause. A lot of tech is putting a little bit of pressure on this market. Keep an eye on Tesla. There's lots of stories out there about just how open and robust was their communication around autonomous driving. The stock is down 2.7% ahead of the open. But breadth is taking a bit of a push lower this morning. We've got a raft of Fed speak coming through over the next 24 hours. Right now, pause for thought on these equities. And we've had a lot of discussion about whether it's time to reach for value. Well, if that Russell is where it is, maybe that's your opportunity. Fed speak, I mentioned it. You've got Jefferson, Collins, and Cook. Bond sales this afternoon. All eyes down. 10-year notes. The 3-year paper went fine yesterday. Rolling forward to Thursday, it is the Bank of England. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And we take a close look at the export data for China as well. So there's quite a bit to chew on, but a lot more rhetoric than anything else. That was Countdown to the Open. Tech challenges the rally. We'll bring you the data through the rest of the day. And Reddit, the CEO, joins us a little bit later on programming right here on Bloomberg. Good morning.
What's it like moving from the East Coast, where everything is finance and money, to the West Coast, where everything is technology? Did you fit in right away? And did you really know how to use all the computer things that they give you to use?
So it was pretty fun. There were plenty of times where I would sit around in meetings, and literally I would be Googling terms. And at one meeting, Larry Page actually caught me Googling terms, and he kind of pointed that out to other people in the room, which was a little embarrassing, but I figured there were some things that I could do that they couldn't do. And so it was a learning curve. And my dad always, he taught me at a young age a term that I've used constantly with my teams. He said, in his lab at Stanford, if a physicist could not define a quark in under 30 seconds, they didn't know what they were talking about. And so I use the quark test all the time. If somebody's rambling on and they can't get to the point, they probably don't know what they're talking about. They fail the quark test. My finance team knows this quark test. And at Google, I'm working with amazing computer scientists, so they never fail the quark test. They can explain things really clearly, which shoots you up the learning curve.
But did you understand what they were talking about from the beginning, or did you have a special tutor that's taught you technology? Or did you?
I had actually run tech banking and took Google Public, so I had a little sneak preview.
Bloomberg Surveillance covers the latest in global markets and the political events that influence your world. Join Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, good Wednesday morning from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City to our worldwide audience. This is the Bloomberg Intelligence program. Alex Steele, Paul Sweeney. We're live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming live on YouTube as well. We focus on the 400 research professionals of Bloomberg Intelligence to help us break down stocks, bonds, commodities for the next 2 hours. Coming up, we're going to focus heavily on technology this first hour. Mandeep Singh is going to talk to us. He's a Bloomberg Intelligence tech analyst. We got Uber, we got Lyft, we got Reddit earnings, lots to talk about there. Anurag Rana, also a tech analyst, Bloomberg Intelligence. He's going to talk to us about Apple's China iPhone shipments. They actually came in a little bit better than expected. I don't know what's going on with Apple in China. He'll break it down. Then Matt Schettenhelm, he's a Bloomberg Intelligence media litigation analyst. Why do we want to talk to a media litigation analyst? It's all about TikTok. A lot of folks like TikTok, but is it going to be banned in this country? I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm guessing it's going to end up in the courts, so we'll get to that as well. But first, let's go to John Tucker and get a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thanks, Paul and Alex. And we are being brought to you by Interactive Brokers Bond Marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities with no markups or built-in spreads and low, transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. After the four-day advanced major stock averages lowered a little change, Tesla and NVIDIA leading losses in the mega caps right now. Intel slumped after the chipmaker weakened its revenue outlook after a ban on chip exports to Huawei Technologies. Uber, that is tumbling on the disappointing gross bookings. And as we look at the major averages right now, the S&P 500, 8 points lower. That's down 0.2%. We're at 5178 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, 3 points higher, 38,888 on that index. And the NASDAQ 100 right now down 31 points. That is down 0.2%. Bloomberg Intelligence saying earnings are well on the recovery path now that the 2022-23 earnings season is in the past, and they should return to double-digit growth with widespread participation later this year. Quick look at Treasuries, 10-year yield, 2 basis points higher, 448. And the 10 years advancing ahead of the $42 billion auction of the bonds today. And it's worth taking a look at mortgages. Mortgage rates falling last week for the first time since late March. The rate on a 30-year fixed falling 11 basis points, now at 7.18%. Making some progress. We check the markets for you all day long. Right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Alex and Paul.
All right, John Tucker, thank you so very much appreciated. Hi, guys. It's weird I didn't get in at 7 a.m. today.
Yeah,
what
I know.
I missed.
Sleeping in. I mean, I don't know. We're focusing on looking at these markets here, kind of mixed and not a whole lot going on. We had a lot of earnings.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a little disjointed. Like,
Yep.
you don't get a macro read. Like, they feel very specific. I was thinking about your Apple comment from earlier.
Yes.
Cut the price, right? Didn't they cut the price by 12%?
I think so. I mean, but it's just all over the place. What's going on in China? I don't have a good read on that. I don't think a lot of it. Investors and analysts have a good read on China for Apple, and that's kind of the problem with the stock here.
And you have to wonder, too, it's the same thing with Tesla, right? Like, if you're a foreign company selling into a competitive industry in China, if your only recourse at the end of the day will be price cuts.
And for Tesla, the question I have is, like, where do the price cuts come from? Is there some team within Tesla that's doing market analysis and really looking at the competition? Or is Elon just waking up one morning saying we're cutting it by 20% or we're raising by 20%? Go make it happen.
I have a guess,
Yes.
but it's an uneducated guess, to be sure. Yeah, anyway, so it's been an interesting kind of day. The mortgage applications came in a little stronger. 30-year fixed, though, good enough for you to refi? I think not.
No, I got a long way to go. See, I'm sitting on my 6% mortgage. Now
Actually,
I don't
not that
feel so
bad.
dumb. I don't feel so dumb anymore. So, but I would love to get a 5 handle, a low 5 handle at some point. I thought I'd be there by now, quite frankly. I thought the Fed was going to take care of me, but well, we had Richard Clarida in just earlier today, and he says, no, the Fed can wait. The Fed can wait. You know, they did a lot of work to get interest rates up to tame inflation. It's working. Just pause here. We'll see where we're going. So that's kind of where he was.
You've been waiting for lower rates. Private credit's been waiting for lower rates. You have anything with floating debt has been waiting for lower rates. All right, well, let's get some more insight here on what's the underlying stuff that's moving all the stock market here. Carmen Reinecke joins us from Bloomberg News to break it down. You're obviously looking at the Uber-Lyft scenario. What are some of the takeaways so far?
Yeah, so shares of Uber, that's ticker UBER, they're down about 5.9, almost 6% right now. The ride-sharing company reported gross bookings for the first quarter that missed the average analyst estimate. So basically they brought in 37.6 billion. That was 20% year-over-year growth. Wall Street was looking for closer to 38 billion. So this is interesting. Comment from...
I mean, they're still growing, right? It's just like the rate of the growth.
Exactly. A good comment from Bloomberg Intelligence, I thought. They basically are saying that the deceleration in booking could be hinting at rider saturation, and that frequency is likely to be less of a tailwind in the near term as prices for rides get higher. So I thought this was interesting. A little bit of a macro takeaway, potentially, just that people aren't taking as many rides.
Well, Lyft reported their stock is up 7% here. They beat on bookings as it adds new riders. So I think the marketplace, I think I am reflective of the rideshare marketplace and not Matt Miller. What I do, like I did this morning when I screwed up my Bloomberg car this morning, I put it for 4:40 p.m., not 4:40 a.m. Bad mistake. When I recognized that, I opened up Lyft, opened up Uber, put it in there, took the lower price one, boom, that's how I hit it.
Well, that's why, in some ways, Uber is also looking to expand in other investments. And I'm really interested to see how that winds up panning out, like Uber Eats, for example, and their relationship now with Instacart or Instatarts, as John Tucker liked to call that yesterday. We want to make sure we honor that.
You screw up just once and you screw up for life.
It's because we love you so much. So I think that feels dead on also, but so it's hard to make that necessarily a macro read if you're going to be investing in the stuff that's going to wind up making you money. Do you know how to do the car? You do a recurring reservation.
Oh,
you call
I kind of I'm different places at different times, but yes, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and then you just like change the day if you need to, just so you know that there'll be a car that may show up.
Okay,
but I understand your dilemma.
Okay, very good. What else you got, Carmen?
Yeah, so I did also want to point out Lyft, as you were just saying, it's up 9.3% right now. So really seeing sort of the difference there and what investors are thinking. The other stock that I'm looking at this morning is Shopify, ticker SHOP. Yes. Yeah, so I had an earnings preview on this. Wall Street was really thinking this would go a different way. Right now, shares are down 20%. It looks like it's a record intraday drop. The company posted a surprise loss. Analysts were looking for revenue growth. Basically, what happened here is they knew that there would no longer be a tailwind from the sale of its logistics business, which wrapped up at the end of last year. I think Wall Street wasn't anticipating that there would be such a loss from this. It's not great for the company sort of in the middle of a turnaround plan. They cut a lot of jobs last year and also divested from this logistics unit. So, yeah, shares really being punished here, not looking so good.
I'll tell you what this is. This is a company not setting proper expectations.
That's an IR department situation.
Yeah, this is an IR department issue and not kind of getting out in front of this news because, especially as you mentioned, kind of working a turnaround story, you have some, a little bit of leeway to make a misstep, but not like this.
Yeah, this is one of the best performing stocks in the TSX last year, so it's interesting to see it take such a dive. The other one that I'm looking at today is Reddit, RDDT. It's up just a little bit. It had a bigger jump this morning. It was up about 12%. It's paired now, up just a little bit more than 2%. This is just interesting because this is the first earnings report that we've seen since it IPO'd. Basically, investors are liking that the company made improvements to its advertising system that pushed quarterly sales a little bit higher than expected. The thing that's so interesting about the social media space is there aren't a lot of companies that can really compete with Meta. Not saying that Reddit necessarily can, but it's one that I'm always kind of watching because there's such sort of a variety of companies there.
All right, yeah, that's right. Reddit went public September 17th. $34 a share. The stock's at $50, so it's had a nice move for investors. Morgan Stanley led that IPO. Carmen Reinecke, thank you so much for joining us. Carmen Reinecke, she covers all the equity stuff for Bloomberg. And just we got pretty much through earnings. We got a couple more trickling in. Again, some of these tech names coming in here. We'll hear from some of the retailers as well. But by and large, the earnings season, you talk to the strategists, they're saying, hey, we've seen high single digit, maybe close to 10% earnings growth on, low single-digit revenue growth, but that's kind of the environment. That's not bad.
Nope. Corporate profits, corporate profits, corporate profits. Like there was a great piece, I think it was in the Journal, that talked about the divergence that we see, right? CEO confidence really high, corporate profits really high, wages not keeping up in some areas with inflation, some areas it is, and then NFIB sentiment, small business sentiment, not great. That divergence, we continue. Let's continue the conversation with Uber and Lyft to get the read on what's going on here. Mandeep Singh, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Tech Industry Analyst, joins us now. Mandeep, for Uber, was it they're investing in other stuff, that's why they're disappointing, or is it Paul's fault because he comparison shops between Lyft and Uber?
I think Uber does have a stickier business model now in the sense that people are more used to taking Uber simply because it's become part of their habit. So that price comparison narrative is sort of fading, although it's still, I would say, used by a few subscribers. The overarching question is, how big is this market in terms of the rider base? So what you're seeing with both Uber and Lyft is a flatlining of the new customer adds. And that is a bigger problem because then the market suddenly feels saturated. How do you grow revenue? Do you boost ride frequency, or you layer in some other service? And I think the answer isn't that obvious because to an extent, there is a discretionary part to both their business models. Like if I choose to take public transportation instead of Uber, I could do that. And it's just still a nice to have in a lot of the rides that people take. So that's the aspect, I think, that's what's driving the guidance and the tapering of bookings growth. And I think investors are reacting.
This is a global, I think about areas for growth. I would agree. I would guess the U.S. market is at or close to saturation. I don't know. Everybody's been using Uber for years now, so and Lyft, car ride sharing, but they get almost half of the revenue outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
So what's the call there?
Well, so again, you have to compare it to what will drive the next leg of growth. And to my mind, their take rates aren't going to expand. So take rates are coming under pressure. In the US, there are specific cities that are saying you should give higher wages to the workers. So that debate will always be with these companies. You can never get your way out of, no matter how fast you grow. And Uber announced a buyback last quarter, but I think that's where the regulatory pressure is unlikely to abate. And to my mind, these companies, even though they have an established business model, that ride frequency element is huge. And I just find it hard if Tesla is going to come up with robotaxis, that's going to impact the take rates for Uber and Lyft. I mean, imagine Tesla adding a new tab within their app for ride sharing. I think it's a big risk. I mean, clearly.
You think they're really going to do that?
Elon Musk has said there will be a robotaxi launch on August 7th.
I'm not getting in on that.
So
maybe not today, but your point is over time. That's
and the market will obviously look way ahead of that. And I'm more concerned about the take rates. Right now, Uber's take rates are close to 40% for certain type of rides, even though the blended take rate is close to 30. But 40% take rate. I mean, imagine what would happen to that take rate if robotaxis come in the equation. It'll be a lot lower than 40% for sure.
But also, I guess but if you do the robotaxi thing, like, can't Uber then get their own robotaxis and invest, or does that just and then their take rate's 100%?
So Uber has a partnership with Waymo because Waymo doesn't want to deploy on their own network and be in the business of maintaining the cars, so they want to use Uber's network. But Tesla, I mean, they want to do everything by themselves. So right now they haven't announced any partnership. I think there's all the more reason for Lyft to partner with a Tesla, simply because they're the smaller player, and this kind of gives them an opportunity to catch up, which is what Uber seems to be doing with the Instacart partnership, is how can I make my network bigger, even if that means partnering with your competitor. And I do think it's going to impact their delivery bookings in the near term, but still, they want to grow their network.
All right, Lyft had numbers last night, a little better than expected.
That's the
How
best.
do you differentiate the call between Reddit?
Yeah,
and
I don't think
Uber and Lyft. Sorry.
it's a question of Lyft gaining market share from Uber in any way. This was more of a case of expectations being really low.
Okay.
And they came out and showed, okay, we are showing some cost discipline. We're not losing any more market share, which was the case for the past 3 quarters, and the stock seems to have reacted 10%.
So to your point, Paul, the opposite of what happened with Reddit. Good IR department.
Yes. Yes.
For example, we were talking earlier with Reddit being hit, or Shopify, I should say.
Yeah.
Shopify, that the IR department just didn't manage expectations. What's up with Reddit? What do you make of the numbers?
Wait, first of all, what is Reddit? I'm not read in on this Reddit thing. I missed that.
Think of them as another social media platform,
Okay.
even though
Okay.
social media definition continues to broaden, but they're a platform where users spend 20 to 25 minutes of their time every day. And their daily active users
Is that a lot?
that's a lot.
Okay.
In the social media sphere. And look, their sequential daily active user growth was 9 million. So they added almost 9 million new users. That's a big number. And their relevance in large language models, that's the biggest driver. Every company that has their foundational large language model needs Reddit data to train their model on.
So that was the whole pitch in the IPO, that it was like, people are going to pay Reddit to get their users' posts because it helps their language model, right?
Yes, yes.
Are they making money from that? And how much?
Yesterday, they called out the incremental traffic they're getting from Google because of that. So a lot of the Google large language model results link to Reddit posts. So they get those automatic clicks because the large language model generates a response that has a blue link to a Reddit post. So clearly that traffic, incremental traffic, has been a big boost for Reddit, and now they are trying to monetize it through ads, but their ad systems aren't as sophisticated as your Meta and some of the other social media players, so that will take them a while to catch up in terms of building their ads.
So the Reddit story is just an advertising story?
Advertising
So it's the
story.
same old, same old, same old.
And data licensing.
And
They're
data
selling
licensing.
Their, data.
All right, I'm not sure I'm buying that, but the IPO bought it. I mean, $34 and stock
look at the runway.
$50.
Compared to a Meta, this company has got a lot of runway to add users, to add data licensing. Why wouldn't you buy a social media story at an earlier stage as opposed to a mature stage?
Yep. So where is this? All right, San Francisco. All right, another good San Francisco story. Who's this guy, Steve Huffman, the founder? Is he a player?
I mean, look, the company has been around for 18 plus years, so it's
that's
not.
right. That's right. Now I remember.
You know who's big on it? John Tucker. He's all over Reddit
All
like crazy.
over the
Yeah,
Reddit.
he searched.
What does he do again?
He's got streams.
he's hip.
Yep, he's hip.
Like that.
Exactly.
Me on social media?
I'm
no,
kidding.
ain't gonna happen.
You're not even on the instant message on the Bloomberg.
It's just
I know.
dangerous to put my thoughts out there.
I have sent you just like the link of the Met Gala outfits, and you still won't look at it. Mandeep, thanks a lot. We appreciate you. Mandeep Singh, a Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Tech Industry Analyst, joining us there. Coming up, we're going to talk to Anurag Rana, Bloomberg Intelligence Technology Analyst on Apple's China iPhone shipments, to try and get some answers for Paul on what is going on with Apple in China. This is Bloomberg.
Updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. After the four-day advance that drove the market to its longest winning streak since March, major stock averages right now, they are mixed, a little change. You have 7 of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500 lower right now. Consumer discretionary among the big drags. That's where you're going to find shares of Tesla. They're down about 2.5%. We had that earlier Reuters report about the Justice Department, U.S. regulators possibly investigating Tesla. Not a news story. What's new is the potential charges in this story. S&P 500, 6 points lower right now. That's down 0.1%. We're at 51.81 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, it's higher, 16 points higher, 38,898 on the index. And the NASDAQ 100 down 13 points. That's down about 0.7%. Intel, the biggest laggard in the Dow. The U.S. revoking licenses, allowing Huawei to buy semiconductors from Intel as well as Qualcomm. And also shares of Apple among the most actively traded. They are down about 0.25% right now. Chinese iPhone shipments, this is according to the official data from China, jumping about 12% in March after Apple and its retailers cut prices. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Alex.
Thank you so much, John Tucker. Let's stay on that Apple story for a moment. So Apple stock is down by about 0.3%. As John Tucker was reporting, the Chinese iPhone shipments jumped about 12% in March after Apple and its retailers slashed prices. This is according to official data. So what does that mean? What do price cuts actually look like? Joining us now is Anurag Rana, Bloomberg Intelligence technology analyst on Apple's China iPhone shipments. What kind of price cuts? I read the headline quickly and I thought it was 12% price cuts. But what kind of price cuts are we looking for?
See, again, this is very old. Also showed why people are getting so excited about it. I mean, they already reported the quarter in April and, a few days ago. And, Tim Cook said that they grew their sales in China. So I'm not so sure why people are getting so excited about March. The big thing is there's an event coming in June. The big question would be whether Apple's going to repeat the price cuts in June or not, because right now everything hangs out on what will happen in the second quarter, because the guidance, though it's good, but if you back into it, iPhone sales will still be down in the second quarter for Apple.
Anurag, can we step back and can you help us just kind of frame out the competitive landscape for the phone business in China? What was it like for Apple several years ago and what is it now?
So, Apple has been gaining share over the last several years steadily. And it is extremely important for Apple to, do well in China because that is the growth engine. That is the only place where they're going to, show a decent amount of actual number of units growth. However, what happened was Huawei, which is a local brand, had not released a big phone for years because of certain restrictions and other things. And they released a big 5G phone for the first time after a long, you could say, break. What happened with that is who had those phones early on went in, quite a bit of them increased the sales of that particular brand, while Apple continued to struggle at that time for that particular period, only because, there was a lot of discussion about government officials not using Apple phones, want to use something local, as well as consumer weakness. Apple, for the first time, I would say a few months ago, did unusual price cuts, and which is what we are hearing, led to the unit shipment increase. The big question or the big debate for all of us, including, what we have discussed with you as well, is whether this is a cyclical problem for Apple in China or whether there's a structural problem of people not buying iPhones. We think it's a cyclical issue. Over time, it's going to play out because, you have ups and downs in unit shipments. And if Apple is going to be as aggressive in investing in China, adding more factories over there, I don't see a reason why the Chinese government is going to be against them. But on the other side of the equation, if the U.S. government is very strict with, Huawei and other local brands, they're going to go after Apple. So there is a lot hanging on Apple at this point when it comes to the phone market.
What did you make of the iPad announcement yesterday? I gotta say, it was like the least covered Apple event I think I've ever seen. So they have AI-focused Pro model. So that was what really stood out to me. And I kind of want to know, did you like it? What did you think of it? And is there a template now that we're going to use from the iPad to then what an AI phone maybe looks like?
That's a brilliant question, because I really was thinking on the same lines yesterday that this is an interesting, because if they had chip ready for the iPad, maybe they're working hard to do something similar for the phone, because that's what's going to drive growth for them. Now, as far as the product is concerned, I was blown away. It was beautiful. They're going to have it in my local store on Wednesday, and I'm going to go test it out and see how it plays. Now the thing that's relevant is Apple iPad really got a boost in FY20, right around the pandemic. That year, iPad sales grew up 34% with a high watermark of $31 billion that year. Since then, the sales have been declining, only because you have this massive pull forward in demand because of the pandemic. iPad refresh rate, or typically the years it takes for one to replace it or it goes bad, is about 5 years. So we are really not expecting mathematically this release to do a fair amount of stuff in terms of revenue for this year. For next year, we are expecting that to have a double-digit growth rate for iPad for FY25. So that's really the iPad story, but I think the read-through is if they have an AI chip that's doing, it's performing so well, if something similar to that comes to the phone, I think it could be a game changer.
Oh, okay.
All right, Anurag, I think I'm going out to San Francisco next month for this developer conference. I think that's the place to be. If I go out there, am I going to see an AI, oh, wow moment from Apple, do you think?
I personally think if it is just left for Apple, it's not going to do it. Only because they just started pushing a lot of R&D into this over the last 6 to 12 months. But if they announced a deal with Google that they're going to license some of Google's product to run on the iOS, I think that could make a difference. Now, remember, they already have a very strong partnership with Google on the search side. And I'm hoping for, both the company's sake, because, we have heard like all the trouble that Google has to, overpower all the discussions around search and stuff. If they do a partnership with Apple, it's going to help both the companies, and it's really going to help Apple in order to get a small language model onto the phone that can help me with, a lot of the AI related queries. Now, assuming the hardware is there to support it, I think it helps out both the companies.
Before I let you go, you mentioned that you said the iPad was amazing and yada yada. You're gonna go to the store and look at it. Really? Like it was that cool?
Yeah,
like do Paul and I need to care?
It was. I mean, it is something that, I don't carry a laptop nowadays. I mean, it's only the phone that you deal with. But if you do want a device that is extremely thin, extremely light, and it can take care of all your computing needs, I mean, why not, make the leap and get rid of the laptop altogether? Because remember, the iPad was always supposed to be a replacement for the for the laptop, but it never has occurred. A lot of people use it to watch movies. I mean, that's where it ends usually. But I think I'm going to try to make that leap now.
Interesting. Well, that actually. So I don't have a computer. Did you know this about me?
I don't have one either.
Okay, because you have your phone.
Yep.
But if you could do it on the iPad with a bigger screen,
I have an
easier
iPad,
to work.
but I use it less and less and less and less because I use the phone more and more and more. That's kind of
even
how it works.
to work and do all those things.
Yes, the whole thing on the phone.
Interesting. Well,
Hey,
yeah, go ahead.
Anurag, can you tell me what Shopify is and why the stock is down 20% today?
Oh, Shopify is one of the most innovative companies that's out there. In fact, I would, I equate their founder to be one of the smartest people that I have seen, from our generation. Wow. Very equivalent to, equivalent to what Steve Jobs was on, let's say 15 years ago or so. Yeah, it's a remarkable company. The stock's down today because the guidance is a bit light. So I'm sure all the hedge funds are getting out of this thing, but this is a company I think is going to be there for a very long period of time. I have liked this company for, I think 6-7 years. It's just a phenomenal story.
And
frankly, the software.
I don't use it, so explain to me what they do.
Yeah. So they allow merchants to get online and start, stores immediately. It's just like you can if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a millennial, if you are if you are one of the influencers, you're going to be using their software to sell their products. I mean, this is a this is the next gen company for in what I call digital commerce software. So in principle, they help people get online and sell products. They sell the software, they sell the platform. I mean, it is for the cool people, frankly.
So I don't go and shop there, but any website that I may go to helps me.
Yes.
That's what's helping me do that.
Yeah, it is. If you see one of the coolest websites on your phone, on your on the browser, it's most likely being driven by something that's built on Shopify. So,
so if I'm shopping on Instagram though, and then I go to a website from Instagram, is that still Shopify?
Yes. So Shopify is one of the very few companies that can integrate with any digital channel. You can shop through your, Instagram, through any of the other social media platforms. If I'm a merchant and I want to sell a product, I can go onto Shopify's platform, create my own websites, billing system, front-end system, back-end system, payment systems. They take care of everything on the back end. All you have to do is have a good product to sell.
All right.
Very cool.
You explained it. Now I understand. All right.
I get
And this seems like, again, I'm going to reiterate, just a bad job of investor relations, managing expectations, it seems like. Anurag Rana, technology analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, big fan of Shopify. Who knew? Joining us from that technology capital that is known as Chicago, Illinois. Who knew about that? S&P 500 pretty much unched on the day. Same for the Dow. NASDAQ off about 0.1%. So at the index level, not a whole lot happening here. Yields 10-year Treasury, a couple of basis points higher. Let's call it 4.47% here on your 10-year. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Paul, Alex, and John. A Georgia appeals court today agreed to review a lower court ruling allowing Fulton County DA Fani Willis to continue to prosecute the election interference case she brought up against former President Donald Trump. Trump wanted Willis removed from the case, saying her romantic relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Way created a conflict of interest. Federal Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida, presiding over Trump's classified documents prosecution, has canceled the May 20th trial date, postponing it indefinitely. Loyola law professor Jessica Levinson.
She said there's just a lot of evidentiary issues to sort out. And she is pointing to the fact that we're talking about some concerns about national security. And that does raise additional questions for any judge when they're overseeing a trial like this.
Porn star Stormy Daniels resumes testimony tomorrow at former President Trump's New York hush money trial. Yesterday, Daniels was on the witness stand about a sexual encounter she says they had in 2006. Daniels says the encounter led to her being paid off to stay silent during the 2016 presidential election. A new Fannie Mae study found nearly 50% of homeowners are concerned about extreme weather and its effect it has on their homes. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are losing their homeowners insurance due to climate issues, from wildfires to hurricanes to fraudulent property claims. Matthew Eby is the founder of First Street Foundation, a nonprofit that studies climate risks.
Insurance companies have been backing out of places that they can't actually charge a premium that's commensurate with the risk. And so that leaves us in an unfortunate situation where the insurers that are left are generally the insurers of last resort, the ones that the state provides. And those do charge those increased premiums.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom. This Bloomberg Business Flash seeing something of a defensive shift. Utility companies beating the S&P 500. Utilities right now the best performing industry group in the index, and that's where we're going to find independent power producer Vistra. It is up close to 10%. This is actually the best performing individual stock in the S&P 500 right now. Vistra boosting its ongoing operations adjusted EBITDA guidance for the full year. Pfizer agreeing to settle more than 10,000 cases accusing it of the cancer risk, hiding the cancer risk from its Zantac heartburn drug. And shares of Pfizer right now up about 0.8%. Overall, the S&P 500 4 points lower at 5183 on the index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average 27 points higher. That's about 0.1%. And the NASDAQ 100 right now 11 points higher. That is up less than 0.1%. Most active trading right now, shares of Tesla, they're down 1.9%. We told you earlier, prosecutors examining whether Tesla committed fraud. That was according to a report from Reuters. Actually, the investigation is something we've known about for a while. And also, after their earnings report, shares of Uber down 6.7%. Among other things, they missed on bookings. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Alex.
All right, thank you so much, John Tucker. It does feel like stocks are getting hit pretty hard today if they disappoint. Like, it feels like there's some punishment. That definitely happens.
But surprisingly enough, off the worst levels of the session, in fact, the Dow in the green. S&P 500, not too far behind.
All right, let's see how that goes into the close. So one other story we want to focus on here is TikTok. So China-based ByteDance made it clear that it will not comply with a new U.S. law requiring it to sell its popular TikTok video sharing app. And that sets up, guess what? It's all for the lawyers and the judges, a prolonged court battle that basically is going to pit free speech rights against national security interests. And the rumor is that it could wind up at the Supreme Court. So we want to get more data on this. Matthew Schettenhelm is Bloomberg Intelligence media litigation analyst. I just think the fact that we have a media litigation analyst says a lot about where we are in M&A and in big tech growth, et cetera. Matthew, what do you make? First of all, walk us through what this lawsuit is.
Yeah, so this is the First Amendment lawsuit that we expected TikTok to bring, basically saying that Congress's action violates its First Amendment rights, that it, like any other platform, think about the New York Times or any other media outlet, if Congress were to effectively ban it, that it violates the First Amendment to do so unless Congress can pass a pretty tough test. And so I think this is a pretty substantial First Amendment case because we've rarely seen Congress take such drastic action with respect to such a major media platform.
You know, when we hired Matt, he was just a kid. Now he's got gray hair.
I know. I don't know what happened.
Exactly. As a grizzled veteran there. Matt, I know it's important which court these things go to. So tell us where you think this case will be litigated initially and kind of how that might play out.
So this one's pretty easy to figure that out because Congress limited where the companies can sue. And they said any suit can only be filed at the D.C. Circuit here in Washington, which is sometimes referred to as the second most important court in the United States below the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a court that takes most of its cases actually involve challenges to U.S. government action, usually agencies, the alphabet soup of agencies, the FCC, the FAA, the EPA. But here it's Congress actually taking the action. So this is a pretty experienced court. This won't allow a single judge to go out and sort of make a name for himself with an opinion. This will be a 3-judge panel of very experienced judges. And then the only appeal option would be to the Supreme Court after that.
Does it violate the First Amendment free speech rights?
So I think it's a strong argument that TikTok presents. This is not an easy case on either side. What the court is going to look at is whether there is an important interest that Congress was trying to serve and whether it tried to address that interest in an appropriate and narrow way. Did it burden more speech than is necessary to go after the interest? And one of the things that the government has going for it here is that this is a national security question. I think if this were just an agency, trying to do this, I think that the D.C. Circuit would have issues with the state of the record here and require it to do more. There's very little evidence in the legislative record about what exactly is the risk and why Congress needed to pursue this avenue versus another avenue. If an agency did this, a court would have issues with it. But this is Congress. This is our biggest policy-making body, and it's on national security, something these judges really know nothing about, and they're going to be very careful about interfering. So at the end of the day, it's a close call, but I give the United States a slight edge because of that deference on national security questions where judges just aren't expert.
So let's just assume that maybe this D.C. district rules in favor of Congress. Tic Tac presumably would then take it to the Supreme Court. Do you think the Supreme Court would hear such a case?
Yeah, so every Supreme Court case is discretionary. They could say no. I think more likely if the scenario were flipped, I think the Supreme Court would take it. That if the D.C. Circuit rules initially in TikTok's favor, I think the United States would almost certainly get a second chance at the Supreme Court. And that's one of the reasons why I like the United States' chances here, is that I see even if it doesn't go well for the United States at the D.C. Circuit, I think it might go better at the Supreme Court. It gets two shots at it. If the D.C. Circuit rules for the United States, I could see the Supreme Court saying, you know what, the D.C. Circuit got it right. We don't need to take it up and say the same thing. So, it's definitely going to be on the Supreme Court's radar, assuming the timing fits. That's going to be the first question, is how do you squeeze all this in on Congress's timeline? By January 19th, we're supposed to have a divestiture. The courts usually take much longer than that.
If Mnuchin gets together his buddies, or if somebody else comes in and wants to buy it, how does that complicate the court case?
Yeah, that's a great question, because for all of this to happen on such a short timeline is almost impossible. I think the court case is going to press ahead. And one of the first things we're going to see is a filing from TikTok giving us its strategy on the timing. Is it going to ask the court to expedite this case? Is it going to ask the court to pause Congress's deadlines to give more time for those sorts of negotiations? We don't know yet. That should come, I think, in the next couple days. Some look at the strategy there. But it's definitely difficult to see how you squeeze both a potential divestiture and litigation in at the same time. I think they have to be going at the same time on two tracks.
Who argues this case on behalf of the U.S. government?
Good question.
Yeah, I would think it's pretty high level attorneys in the Attorney General office. So the potentially the Solicitor General of the United States, if this goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. This suit named Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, as the defendant. So I would think he would name one of his top attorneys to represent him and the United States in this case.
All right. Presumably we have some good attorneys working for us in the government, I would like to think.
I think this was a David. So David Weston is a recovering lawyer.
Yes.
He's antitrust, but still. And years ago, he was like, you know what? Anything is just good for lawyers.
Good for lawyers.
All of this just puts lawyers more job.
Because they bill by the hour, by the minute. Matt Shettenhelm, thank you so much. We appreciate it. He doesn't bill by the hour. We get him on straight retainer. Come on to Bloomberg Intelligence radio show. Matt Shettenhelm, media litigation analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. He's down in D.C. where a lot of this stuff happens, all these agencies and the litigation arising there. So again, TikTok, important. I mean, I don't know how many gajillions of people are on TikTok, but a lot. It's important for the kids. It's important for John Tucker. He's got a huge presence. I think he's an influencer, is what they call him.
I would definitely.
So he's paying close attention to this litigation. S&P 500 unched on the day. This is Bloomberg.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm John Tucker in the newsroom. Look at some of the company stories we're following. Let's start with this one. It has to do with law firms. Sullivan and Cromwell. They're going to be extremely vigilant about vetting future hires. This follows reports of harassment at pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses. Joe Shanker is the senior chair of the firm. He says, we've been following closely events at schools from which we recruit and have been in touch with the placement offices, deans, and trustees, as well as a lot of concerned students. Shanker, in the weeks after the October 7th attack on Israel by Hamas, did circulate a letter initially signed by more than 24 firms that urged law school deans to take an unequivocal stance against the anti-Semitic harassment on campuses. More than 250 firms have signed the letter at the latest count. Marcy Venture Partners, this is the firm co-founded by hip-hop star Jay-Z, is in advanced talks to merge with the investment arm of Pendulum Holdings. Now, Marcy is a nod to Brooklyn's Marcy Projects. That's where Jay-Z grew up. It's invested in companies including a startup that makes vegan chicken nuggets, Merit Beauty, Our Place, and Babylist. Jay-Z has separately backed Swedish oat milk maker Oatly, as well as joining a funding round with Katy Perry and Serena Williams for Impossible Foods. And it's always great to have your own island. Carnival, Disney Cruise Lines, Norwegian Cruise Line, and Caribbean Cruises in the race for land. Cruise lines have spent at least $1.5 billion since 2019 to expand or improve private stops in the Caribbean and elsewhere. For example, Royal Caribbean's so-called Perfect Day at Coco Bay is a private island 55 miles from Nassau, and it rakes in a ton of money, 40% returns on investment. That's your company news.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, happy middle of the weekday. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence. We bring you all the top news in economics and finance. With the lens of our Bloomberg Intelligence analysts, they cover pretty much everything all around the world. We also like to bring you world and national news. And for that, here's Michael Barr. Michael?
Thank you very much, Alex, Paul, John. Today, a Georgia appeals court agreed to review a lower court ruling allowing Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis to continue to prosecute the election interference case she brought against former President Donald Trump. Trump had tried to get Willis and her office removed from the case, saying her romantic relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade created a conflict of interest. It's a day off in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York. Adult film star Stormy Daniels will return to the witness stand tomorrow. Daniels described her alleged sexual encounter with Trump in 2006. Trump, who has denied the affair ever happened, says the prosecution's case is totally falling apart.
I should be out campaigning right now. We're leading in all the polls. I'd like to be campaigning. We'll be leading by a lot more.
Inside court, Trump was audibly cursing and shaking his head during Daniels' testimony. Meanwhile, Trump's classified documents trial is postponed. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon, who is overseeing the criminal proceeding in Florida, has set a whole new schedule for motions in the case and announced that a previously scheduled May 20th trial date is pushed back now indefinitely. Special counsel Jack Smith wanted the judge to reschedule the trial for July, but the judge's order suggests she's not likely to even decide on a new date by then. It is a blow to the Justice Department's efforts to get a jury verdict in the case before the November presidential election. Smith is also waiting on a ruling on presidential immunity from the Supreme Court to determine if yet another case can move forward this year. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The U.S. paused a shipment of bombs to Israel. It's over concerns that Israel was approaching a decision on launching a full-scale assault on the southern Gaza city of Rafah against the wishes of the U.S. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Paul, Alex, and John.
All right, thank you so much. I'm Michael Barr, and John Tucker is staying for this story, so we appreciate him for that. So this comes from the Washington Post. After 114 years of being known as the Boy Scouts of America, today is the day where it changes its name. Or actually, yesterday was the day it changes its name to Scouting America. Major rebrand announced yesterday, comes years after there's been lots of shakeup within the Boy Scouts organization. 5 years ago, it started welcoming girls. That was the biggie. They ended a long-time ban on openly gay scouts in 2013. They ended its prohibition on gay troop leaders in 2015. And then 2017, they announced it would allow transgender boys in its ranks. So basically boys that when they were born, their organs were girls. And now they are Scouting America. Guys?
Okay. You tie that. My three sons were all into scouting, so we did that for many, many years. I was a scouting leader in my town for several years. So we were all into that, did all the camping, and I hate camping, but we did all the camping. Ever. But this ties into a story we had yesterday, John Tucker, about the Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
What's this?
Well, there's so many restrictions on carrying knives at so many different places, whatever. So the maker of Swiss Army, they're coming out with a version that doesn't have a blade. So not only...
So what is that?
So if you're in the Boy Scouts or whatever it's now...
Scouting America.
If you're a scout in Scouting America, you can now... You can't carry a pocket. It's a pocket knife without a blade.
Without the knife?
Well, the little scissors, the little file. I don't know. That's a great question because, again, so many memories of our scouts out there in the middle of nowhere in the swamps of New Jersey, northwest New Jersey.
The things I did with my Swiss Army knife.
Exactly.
When I was in scouting.
The point is, you need the knife to do the stuff.
You need the knife to survive.
To
cut
whittle
down trees and whittle and
we gotta whittle.
Start fires and I don't know.
So that's, it all ties in at the end. Scouting America, the Swiss Army knife, we've just brought it all together there. So
Swiss Army Thing.
Yeah.
Swiss. What's the rebrand combo?
I don't know the rebrand.
My Swiss Army knife.
Yeah,
Swiss
pry it
Army
out of my cold
event. I don't know. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney.
The real outperformance has been the U.S. corporate high yield.
Are the companies lean enough? Have they trimmed all the fat?
The semiconductor business is a really cyclical business.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Do investors like the M&A that we've seen?
These are two big-time blue-chip companies.
The window between the peak and cut changing super fast.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, coming up in this hour, in just moments, we're going to check into a conversation that our Bloomberg technology anchors Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow are going to have with Steve Huffman. He is the Reddit president, CEO, and co-founder. They just reported their earnings, their first earnings as a publicly traded company. We'll get to the latest on that. We're also going to talk to Michael Shepard. He's a Bloomberg News senior editor on the latest on Intel. Not good news from our good friends at Intel. They're having some continued challenges there. And so we're going to take a look at that. So a lot coming up here. But again, Reddit was one of those IPOs that has done very well. They put out some good numbers today. And so we'll get the latest on that. I'm not a Reddit user, but I know a ton of people are, and it's a great community. Mandeep Singh was just here from Bloomberg Intelligence saying, and Anurag Rana, who was talking about it, also is an interesting tech company.
Yeah, and also just how you wind up making money, right? Like, it's not just ads, but then they can monetize what users actually post by selling it to companies that need that language model for AI. So that's quite interesting. So we're definitely looking forward to that interview. Just a couple updates. Okay, Uber stock is off by over 8%. You got Lyft on the flip side up by 9%. You mentioned Intel, that stock off by 2.5%. We're going to break that down throughout the session as well. But it's nice to kick it off with Reddit and how they're going to wind up growing all that revenue at the same time.
Yep, right now let's go to Bloomberg anchors Caroline Hyde, Ed Ludlow, sitting down with Steve Huffman, Reddit president, CEO, and co-founder. Let's listen in.
Stronger than expected. They're also seeing kind of some bump in activity for the riders themselves, not just rider growth, but stickiness, the amount they're using it. Then you have Rivian. Rivian's a difficult one. It's not really about in the moment, it's about the future. Later in the hour, we'll hear again from the CEO, RJ Scaringe. And what I tried to get from him was a sense of like, is this really going to plan? Then there's Reddit. Reddit's debut earnings. We want to get to that stock and welcome our Bloomberg TV and radio audiences worldwide. Reddit out with its first earnings report as a public company. Shares markedly higher, 7%. Let's bring in Reddit CEO, Steve Huffman. And Steve, the quarter gone, 48% top line growth. You're doing well. The ad environment seems really good. But I actually want to start with the next big thing. And that seems to be the user economy. That seems to be your focus. Tell me about the user economy strategy.
So, good morning. Thanks for having me. So, the user economy is the family of products and features that we're building to facilitate transactions between users on the platform. So, user-to-user gifting, user-to-user subscription, user community subscriptions, things like that. We think there's a ton of potential here. One of our sayings at Reddit is the only thing that scales with users is users. And so, look, the ads business is great and can scale pretty much infinitely from our point of view, but we'd love to have another business model to sit alongside it, and that's what the user economy is.
Steve, alongside also the ad business that you say can infinitely scale, has been AI and the selling of data and licensing to some of those big businesses that are creating large language models based upon the data that you license, Google being one of them. How infinite is that revenue stream? Because once the models are trained, how necessary is it to keep on licensing?
So I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. First, the potential value here is, I think, quite large. And between us and other folks in the market, we're actually still developing that. You know, we're finding increasingly folks coming to Reddit. And I think what we're seeing overall, big picture, is in the AI era where increasingly
content online is written by machines, there's this increasing premium on content, perspectives, conversation that comes from real humans, and that's what Reddit provides. So far, we've done one kind of major content licensing deal with Google, but we're talking to others as well. But your question about is it a one-time thing or ongoing? I think what's really important here is folks want real-time access to up-to-date information, conversation, perspectives, right? Imagine a search engine that stopped indexing in 2021. It wouldn't be very helpful. And so I think that real-time feed is really important.
Steve, you took the interesting step to ask Redditors, and particularly Redditors who are investors in the IPO, to submit questions. And those, some of which you answered on the call and some of which you'll follow up in video form. We're showing one of them now, which is, what is the justification for having $1 billion in working capital? Now, I want to take that question and apply it to AI. You know, data licensing is a revenue generation tool for you. But on the technology side, might we see some M&A that answers that question from your Redditor community, but also helps us understand a bit more, like, what are you guys going to do to increase competence, to increase the technology offering on AI?
Sure. Well, look, our first priority with the cash is to invest in the business. So to continue to develop the core Reddit product, the user economy, which we discussed, the developer platform, our AI efforts, all of those things. Our second priority would be M&A. And so, you know, we're always, I think, looking in the market for teams and technology that can really kind of help advance our initiatives. And right, as you allude to, I think there's just a tremendous opportunity in AI, in search, both to make our core product better and potentially to expand it as well.
Let's talk about expansion, and particularly internationally, Steve, because there's much talk about how you're basically translating, able to bring what is, all the reviews, the content, the discussion groups, not just to those that are writing and speaking in the English language, but in French and European countries. How is this likely to be enabled by AI, but also add to the scale of international growth?
Well, this is really exciting. Like, not that long ago, we didn't have the capability of translating our content at human quality. But with today's large language models, we can do that. And so we can translate what is today our mostly English corpus into just about any language. And so we're doing that in French right now and testing that in France, and it's going very well. And so almost immediately, French speakers can see the entire Reddit corpus or consume their entire Reddit corpus in English. And a lot of Reddit's content is universal, right? It's just people talking about life. But even the content that is maybe regionally specific to America, I think is still really interesting to read, and vice versa. And so I'm really excited at this idea that we can fulfill the promise of the internet, which is allow people around the world in different countries and different cultures to communicate in their native language.
For our Bloomberg television and radio audience worldwide, we're speaking to the Reddit CEO, Steve Huffman. And Steve, things are going well right now, it seems. One of the technology changes at the start of this year and even before that was that Google started applying its work in large language models and AI to its search engine. And there is a school of thought that Reddit was a beneficiary of that just within search, Reddit becomes more commonplace, higher up the results that are given. Can you give us any sort of granularity on how that's helping you with growing the Redditor base and keeping the Redditor base?
Well, let's just take a step up for a second. Reddit has what people want, right? People have questions. They often go to Google with questions. Reddit has the best answers on the internet. They want advice. They want information. They want a sense of community and belonging. These are the things that Reddit provides. And search engines like Google, 10 years ago, last year, today, tomorrow, help people find that content on Reddit they're looking for, those answers they're looking for, those communities they're looking for. And so I think I look at this as a natural evolution. Search engines are getting smarter, they're getting better, they're getting more effective, which means they're getting more effective at helping users find what they're looking for on Reddit, which of course benefits our platform and our business. And so I think these are all, I think, welcome evolutions, but Reddit's been a net beneficiary of search for a long time, and I expect that to continue.
How much have you been a net beneficiary of going public, Steve? How much did the IPO help draw people to the platform? How much was it a PR event, do you think, and actually boosted some of the community there?
Well, look, I'm sure that's an aspect to it. You know, it's hard to say, and Reddit primarily grows through word of mouth anyway. We don't really do consumer marketing, and so I think anytime we're in the news, that helps, and the IPO was a lot of news. But look, the reason I was most excited about the IPO is that we were able to include our users as investors. Our users have this deep sense of ownership over Reddit, right? They create the communities, they create the culture, they create all of the content. And for them to have the opportunity to be actual owners, that was our dream. And that was one of the main reasons we went public in the first place. So that's actually what I'm most excited about.
Steve, as a kind of returning founder CEO of Reddit, what's your one personal goal for this year, something you want to achieve?
Well, look, we knocked out 2 of them. We got the company public, and I had my second kid. And so for the rest of this year, I want to deliver on some of the product initiatives that I've been very excited about. So developer platform, the user economy, the machine translation that we've discussed. These are all things, I think, in the day-to-day building of Reddit that I'm very excited about.
Steve, congrats on the second kid. Reddit CEO, Steve Huffman. A joy to have you with us. Thank you.
All right, very good. That was Bloomberg technology anchors, Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow. Speaking with Steve Huffman, he's the Reddit president, CEO, and co-founder. They just reported some good, solid numbers. First quarter as a public company, stock trading up today, so it's good to get an update there on the Reddit community. All right, right now let's get a little bit of a reset here, with the indexes pretty much not doing much here. The S&P flat, the Dow up about 0.2%, the NASDAQ off about 0.1%. But Jess Menton, she looks under the hood. She is a deputy team leader for U.S. equities. She joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Jess, what are you looking at in the market today?
There's a few different things. So beyond some of the individual movers that we'll get into shortly, like Uber, Lyft, Wynn Resorts, I was actually looking at the performance for specifically utility stocks in the S&P 500 over the past 15 trading sessions coming into today. So if you look at this, it's actually up about 11% in that 15 session span. So when you do ROCs, the function in the terminal, so rate of change over that 15 session span, it's actually the last time it was rising this past. It was actually a rate of change last exceeded in the depths of the pandemic in the fall of 2020. So there's a couple different things that are going on here. And we've, Elena Popina, who's our team leader on our team, has looked a lot into this when it comes to utilities, as well as Natalia, who she was actually a producer at Alex's team. And then we stole her and put her on our team too. But she wrote a story recently looking at how when you're thinking about a lot of these AI plays, actually utilities are a big part of this when you think of data centers and how they're powering it. Companies like, if you think Dominion Energy, the ticker symbol D on this, that stock's up over 10% this year. Southern Co is another one that's also up around 10%. And then NextEra Energy, NEE is the ticker symbol on this, up around 20% this year. So all of those basically pretty much outpacing the broader markets here. So there's a few different aspects of this, because usually when you think about utilities, obviously when you think about dividend paying, low volatility type of corner of the broader stock market, whether or not that would be more kind of a safety trade. But some of this plays into when you're looking at what's happening with yields over the last couple of weeks coming down, and sort of the bets that potentially maybe we've seen a potential peak, maybe what's happening there. Also the AI aspect of that. But then also another function I like to use is BDVD, is a terminal in the function where you can look at either the forward-looking estimates for dividend yields, or also you can look at the trailing there. But on a forward aspect, utility stocks are among the highest in the index, probably not surprisingly, about 3.4%. And so that actually exceeds when you're looking at the S&P 500's dividend yield of about 1.5%.
So I have to say, I totally loved this piece because it definitely talked to how my world, energy world, and AI meet. And even Vistra, for example, 52-week high today, reported earnings. Dan Loeb was talking about this was one of his favorite power plays to play the AI trade. So when we say we don't like that utilities are leading the gains in the equity market because it says something bad, meaning that we're getting defensive because we're worried about something bad happening, is that narrative no longer true if there's actually growth in power demand for the first time in like 2 decades?
Right. So there's another layer to that just safe haven type of story. You do have the AI aspect that's a big part of that. So the only thing is when you look at the utility sector as well as the real estate sectors in the S&P 500. So if you go to the S&P 500 and look at MEMB for the members in there, you can see the weightings for the different sectors. So obviously when you think about utilities, a much smaller portion when you are thinking about the big tech being more around 30% record weighting there in the S&P 500. So when you are looking at utilities, I mean, that weighting's around 2.4% in the S&P 500. If you look at real estate, it's the smallest, around 2.1%. So when you do have sectors like that rallying, it doesn't move the needle quite as much as obviously if you think about information technology around, 29.5% weighting there in the S&P, Alex.
Win results.
Yes.
Casinos, or as the kids call it, gaming.
That's right.
I call it gambling, but it's Win Casino. Win is like.
Are you a gambling man?
Wait, are they
Paul
really the same
Sweeney?
now? This is actually an interesting point. Are gaming and gambling now considered the same?
Well, no. For a long time, the gambling industry used the term gaming. And that's a nicer,
that's interesting.
I guess a softer term for, but they've used that for a long time. So anyway, but
Okay.
Win's one of the big plays on Vegas, but also really on Macau.
It is, and a lot of the things with Macau is more of what's happening with the EBITDA margins that have improved, but a big thing that happened, and probably not surprisingly, the first quarter obviously overlapped with the Super Bowl, which was in Vegas, and so you are seeing stronger demand and stronger profit growth in Vegas, but of course the big thing is looking at Macau and its businesses, actually in all 4 of the company's segments, logging higher operating revenues, so you're seeing that strength across the board here if you're thinking about gaming, luxury, retail, also hotel bookings that are really driving that steady demand in Macau proper. So thinking about the post-pandemic rebound in travel to these sort of casino hubs here, and so you are seeing strength improving in Macau after all of that, especially as a lot of those travel restrictions have eased. But then, of course, can't forget what's happening in Vegas and the strength that they've seen in the first quarter there.
Craps, I played.
Are you big on that?
I like Texas Hold'em.
I like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like having control over my bets.
Yeah.
Versus craps.
Right. Okay. No. Very, very good. I play. I play the 6 and the 8, and then my point with the full odds. That's how I play.
All right, fair enough. I mean, each to his own. Win stock down by 2.4%. That's so interesting. It's like despite the fact that they did really well, that stock is down because it's the worry of that long-term growth projects and the capital requirements for that.
Yep.
It's like, and you saw it with Meta too. It's like we don't like the capex people.
Right.
Also, if you have too much capex,
the
we get worried.
casino expansion in Boston was another issue for Wynn that they kind of are holding off on expanding some of that too.
Yeah, I mean, for the gaming business, Vegas and Macau, I'm good there. I don't want my companies investing in Boston and,
You want to keep it into those 2 big hubs.
Because you can buy the regional gaming companies that, do the riverboat stuff and all that. You can do that separately. So anyway, all right, they're very good. Jess Menton, thanks so much for joining us. She does all the stocks, team leader over there in Bloomberg News. Even though she's now a team leader, which means she has management responsibilities, you still get some of her time.
Did you know that she's been there for like 2+ years?
I know,
We just kind of figured it out. That's awesome. All right, coming up, I'm Michael Shepard, Bloomberg News senior editor on Intel. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. The Dow higher, S&P, NASDAQ, both in the red. And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. The Dow up 70 points right now, a gain of 0.2%, but equities have been fluctuating. S&P 500 index remaining below the 5,200 mark that it briefly touched this week. 51.83 right now on the S&P, lower by 4, a drop now of 0.1%. NASDAQ Composite Index down 41, lower by 0.2%. 10-year 4.48%, the 2-year 4.82%. Spot gold today, right now we do have gold trading little changed. We've also got the price of crude oil today. West Texas Intermediate crude oil in the red today. WTI right now is actually WTI higher, up 0.5%, 78.76. Gold 23.15 for an ounce of gold. WTI higher by 0.5%. Intel expects second quarter revenue to fall below the midpoint of previously issued projections because of a new ban on U.S. chip exports to Huawei Technologies. Intel down 2.7%. Qualcomm lower by 0.5%. Again, recapping, S&P down 4, drop there of 0.1%, and crude oil WTI up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We cover all the top news for you in the financial and business world with our great analysts that cover all the industries worldwide. 130 industries and 2,000 plus companies. Let's get more on this Intel thing. So apparently the withdrawal of the license affects U.S. sales of chips for use in Huawei phones and laptops. That's according to people familiar with the matter. Now, the overall decision may not affect a significant volume of chips, but it's really about the U.S. government's determination to curtail China's access to a huge swath of the semiconductor technology. That's why Intel stock is down almost 3%. Michael Shepard is Bloomberg News senior editor, and he's standing by to help us break all of this down. Walk us through the revenue pain that Intel sees from this and the intricacies of what kind of chips they can and cannot sell.
Well, that's a great question, Alex. And for Intel, the company is under some pressure to produce on the turnaround that Pat Gelsinger has outlined to try to get the company back into the vanguard of manufacturing, but here in the U.S. in particular. So analysts are out there looking for any sign of potential trouble for Intel as it tries to execute this plan. And here, even though we're not seeing a significant market for Intel with Huawei, nonetheless, any sign of trouble is something that they have to take into account.
So, you know, for, I guess the bigger picture here, as you step back, it just feels like this technology Cold War between China and the West, China and the U.S., seems to be just intensifying. Is that the feeling in Washington? Is that where Washington really wants to take this?
Well, Paul, I'm glad you brought it up that way in those terms, because we really are seeing much more of a frost when it comes to technology settling in. The U.S. has been making clear, we heard Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo just a few weeks ago say technological security is national security, and they are drawing a line when it comes to the more sophisticated and more advanced technology, especially when it comes to computer chips. The U.S. is a leading innovator, if not a leading producer, of some of the most advanced and tiniest semiconductors that are out there powering technology everywhere. And one of the emerging fronts is, of course, artificial intelligence. And we spoke yesterday to House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCall, who's been pushing for these Huawei restrictions. And he said the idea of the export controls that we reported on yesterday was to keep the most advanced AI tech out of China's hands.
What about tech that's already in their hands that then China can adapt themselves? Wasn't there like a Huawei phone that really scratched everyone's head on like what kind of chips they actually used? I mean, how do you restrict that kind of stuff?
Well, the U.S. is actually investigating what happened with the Mate 90. This device was unveiled as Gina Raimondo was visiting China, and it was taken as a, something that was aimed directly at her during her visit to say that, look, you're trying to put these restrictions in place, we will show you. Now, the U.S. has launched an investigation into how Huawei was able to develop it and whether there are other companies that are forming this shadow network of suppliers to Huawei. In other words, creating proxies that allow the device maker to obtain the chips that it otherwise can't.
So what's the response been from China? Is this going to be a tit for tat type of thing? If I'm Tim Cook, I'm paying attention here.
Well, American technology executives should be watching this space. China overnight responded, calling the moves economic coercion and a violation of what it sees as World Trade Organization rules. And they may very well decide to proceed with the case. At the same time, the U.S. is trying to draw a line around the whole question of national security. And that is going to be something that we see as a tension point between the two countries. The U.S. has made clear that it wants to do business with China, but just not that far. It is only willing to go so far when it comes to trade in more advanced technologies. It wants to preserve the American edge here at home.
How hard is it for Intel to make up that revenue elsewhere?
It's a good question. It's unclear exactly how much they would be losing here. It was only a slight drop if you read between the lines on it. They're now seeing something more to the midpoint of their guidance, but it is still within the revenue that they have projected between $12.5 billion and $13.5 billion.
Michael, we've all grown up with Intel, and I guess we now consider kind of the older generation of Silicon Valley of technology. It appears that they just have not been able to catch that AI wave, at least from investors' perspective, in any way, shape, or form. Is there any optimism that maybe they can, in fact, pivot their company to go to where the puck is going, which is for AI?
Well, Paul, we all remember the Intel Inside jingle from those ads years ago, and that is something that Pat Gelsinger is really trying to recapture, and he is seizing upon the Biden administration's CHIPS Act, all those investments. We're seeing the company launch plants in Arizona and in Ohio. We just profiled the construction of this new facility in Ohio. It was really impressive. Look inside what they are trying to build there. It's ambitious, but it will take some time, too. These plants can't be built overnight, and it is a race against the clock when it comes to AI.
Well, and also as a question, a lot of the stuff, if you announce it, doesn't mean it actually happens. Things get pushed back or pared back. You're going to start off with, say, a plant that's going to do X amount, and then you reduce it to M amount. Are we expecting anything along those lines from Intel? I think there was a great chart on Bloomberg today that showed where chips come from now, and it was an amazing circle chart. Circle chart? They called circle charts? Pie chart. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Pie chart that showed Taiwan and Korea, and then how in 9 years, 8 years, and just the diversification was tremendous, and the majority of that coming from the U.S.
Well, what the U.S. is really hoping to do through the CHIPS Act is to get 20% of production of advanced semiconductors done domestically. Currently, that figure is 0. So that is, and they would like to achieve this goal by 2030. That is a really ambitious target, and they're pushing all out to see if they can achieve it. But the European Union also has a similar goal of trying to amp up its own percentage of advanced semiconductor production. And the idea also is as a hedge in the event that China decides to actually make some move against Taiwan militarily. The U.S. wants to be sure that it can produce chips in the event of a severe supply chain disruption, akin to the one that we saw during the pandemic.
Yeah, that drove home kind of I think kind of just brought to the forefront this whole, reshoring or friendshoring for a lot of different industries, including technology. Michael Shepard, thanks so much for joining us there. Michael Shepard, he's the senior editor for Bloomberg News, joining us from Washington, D.C. And I remember that, I guess we all remember that kind of at the beginning of the pandemic when the global economy really shut down. You're like, oh, we import a lot of stuff, a lot of important stuff, and from some places that may or may not be that dependent, I guess, or dependable, and therefore that whole reshoring, friendshoring, and I guess Mexico's been one of the real beneficiaries of that.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. And that's what was so staggering about this pie chart, just to show how bifurcated it actually is now in terms of how much market share Korea and Taiwan have, and then how much money apparently will be poured in. Even like Europe is going to gain some share. Nothing like the U.S., but nonetheless. I mean, the first mover advantage, right? Like, if you put a lot of money into something and you build something now, are you going to go then build a second plant in Europe, or is it kind of a one and done kind of thing when you're looking at billions and billions and billions dollars worth of investments?
And Michael's referencing a piece of work done by Bloomberg News, the big take story of a week or two ago about that Ohio plant and how big that's going to be and the investment there. So that's a huge investment, but as Michael was suggesting, if you're Intel, the payoff's going to be a while.
It's going to be a while, and that makes it hard for an investor, too, because you're still in a cyclical business with structural change. And I keep going back to that. This is a Brooke Sutherland special, Bloomberg Opinion. You can check her out there. But and how you invest then for something along those lines, and what your timeline has to be like when you're looking at something along a cyclical versus structural world.
All right. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Paul, Alex, and Charlie. A Georgia appeals court today has agreed to review a lower court ruling allowing Fani Willis to continue to prosecute the election interference case she brought against Donald Trump. The former president and some other defendants in the case had tried to get the Fulton County District Attorney and her office removed from the case, saying Willis's romantic relationship with Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade created a conflict of interest. The judge overseeing the case ruled Willis could continue the prosecution if Wade stepped aside, which the special prosecutor did. But the judge allowed Trump and the others to seek a review of his ruling from the appeals court. The House Oversight Committee canceled today's hearing with D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser over a university pro-Palestinian encampment shortly after 33 protesters were arrested. D.C. Metropolitan Police moved in to disperse the demonstration at George Washington University early this morning. D.C. Police Chief Pamela Smith.
This included a simple assault reported to GW Police, security probing of a GW building, indicators that counter-demonstrators were covertly in the encampment, and information that protesters from other schools were traveling to GW.
Campus police at the University of Chicago broke up the encampment of an anti-war demonstration that had occupied the university's quad for 9 days. And while some students were outraged by the forceful removal, others, like graduating senior Perry Zhao, wanted to see the encampment removed.
I don't want a second graduation canceled. I had my graduation from high school in 2020 canceled by COVID, and I wasn't going to passively stand by to watch a second one leave.
Zhao and other students organized a petition that got more than 2,500 signatures to remove the encampments. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 11:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. A mixed day for the U.S. stock market. This Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight, June 4th to the 6th in Nashville, Tennessee. Don't miss the essential event for the financial advice community. Visit insight.bnymellon.com. Wall Street's enthusiasm for stocks fading after a 4-day advance. S&P right now down 3 points. Little change, down less than 0.1%. The Dow session highs up 89 now, up 0.2%. We've got NASDAQ down 37. For the NASDAQ Composite Index, a drop now of 0.2%. 10 years at 4.48%. The 2-year 4.82%. Gold up 0.2%, 23.17 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude now up 0.9%, 79.05 for a barrel of WTI. Bitcoin lower by 1.1%, 62,248 on Bitcoin. Industry data show mortgage rates edged lower last week, the first decline since March. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The contract rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage fell 11 basis points to 7.18%. That provided a lift for mortgage applications, both new loans and loan refinancing. Rates remain high, though, more than double what they were at the end of 2021 before the Federal Reserve started tightening to fight inflation. The data are compiled by the Mortgage Bankers Association. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Uber Technologies reported gross bookings in the first quarter that missed analyst estimates. Uber shares, they're down 8.7%. Crosstown rival Lyft up 8%, both companies based in San Francisco. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. I'm Alex Steele alongside Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Intelligence Radio. We bring you all the top news from Bloomberg News, but also the analysis from Bloomberg Intelligence. They cover about 130 industries, and 2,000 companies worldwide. We also keep you updated on all the great enterprise reporting that we do here at Bloomberg. And this one ties nicely into some earnings that we're seeing. So Affirm, that stock is off by over 7%. Now, this is a buy now, pay later company, which from what I hear is literally what it is. You buy now and you pay later. Their forecasted revenue for the fourth quarter did beat average analyst estimates. Third quarter was also strong, yet the stock is down. The macro read, of course, is when these guys do well, what does that say about the underlying economy? Now, luckily, the Big Take addresses some of this. The Big Take is an in-depth story that we cover every day on Bloomberg. And joining us to discuss it, it's Paige Smith, consumer finance reporter, and also Paulina Cicero. She joins us. They're both joining us in the studio. This is about phantom debt. And the quote is, Americans are racking up phantom debt that Wall Street can't track. Presumably, you guys did this because Affirm was reporting, and that's part of the phantom debt, right? The buy now, pay later. Paulina, what did you discover in this reporting?
So, at first we were looking at how American households are already carrying about $17.5 trillion in debt. And sometime last year, an economist at Wells Fargo pointed to the fact that there's about $46 billion worth of phantom debt lurking in the economy with buy now, pay later services. And we just wanted to note that that's a conservative estimate. Basically, our reporting looked at how no one really knows exactly how much buy now, pay later debt is out there because, due to some regulatory loopholes, a lot of these providers are not furnishing data to credit bureaus. So while economists and Wall Street traders are making, projections on the economic outlooks based on, how the consumer is doing, we don't really know, we don't really have the full picture.
So, Paige, how big is this out there? When I was growing up, we called this stuff layaway. Now it's pay now, buy, or whatever it is, buy now, pay later. Is it a big market? Do we think it's a lot out there? Are people doing this stuff?
Yeah, so just to go back to one thing that Paulina said, actually, so to be clear, it's not lenders that kind of exist in credit card lenders, auto lenders, et cetera. They're not required to actually report this data to credit bureaus, but they are, it's kind of like an ecosystem, right? Like you want to know what consumer debt is out there. I want to know what consumer debt is out there. Let's provide as much data as possible to the credit bureaus. But I think that's a good question because we really don't know how much consumer debt is out there, in particular the buy now, pay later debt. And that's kind of why this Wells Fargo analyst, Tim Quinlan, kind of, penned this or named this phantom debt.
How does it work? So does it like, okay, buy now, pay later, is it 0% interest? Do I have to pay a minimum every month? Like, how does that work, and how is it different or similar to credit cards, for example, Paulina?
So typically, a buy now, pay later option will show up in most online checkouts. It offers, most customers, allows them to split up their purchase into 4 installment payments over the course of 6 weeks. So the first payment is due right at checkout, and then the next 3 are due every 2 weeks after that. And they usually offer this with a pretty quick credit approval, and they offer 0 interest rates. So where consumers start to kind of fall into trouble with buy now, pay later services is, one, if you do fall behind on a payment, there are late fees associated with that. And it's not just that. One of the concerns that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau cited was this issue of loan stacking. So a consumer could take out a buy now, pay later loan on a Tuesday of one week and a Wednesday of, the next week, and those payments will just happen 2 weeks from that time of purchase. And it can be really difficult for consumers to keep track of, when those payments come due, how much they actually owe across, one or sometimes several different buy now, pay later service providers.
I'm looking at your story here, a gentleman, Fabricio Lopez. He found out the hard way that paying on time won't help them build up their credit score. But on the other hand, the downside is that they fall behind. Not only do they get charged late fees, but they'll also get, the loan turned over to debt collectors. So are we seeing more of that, I guess?
I would say it is. It's just, again, it's to go back to the main point, it's challenging to quantify how much of this debt is out there on top of expensive payments that consumers already have to grapple with, like rent and gas and sort of you name it. But yes, essentially, a lot of these companies kind of market themselves as being able to build credit or help consumers to build credit, when in fact the downsides are still there, which is if you miss those payments, those are charged off, and then it's turned over to debt collectors, and you do see a ding on your credit score. But there's little upside in that if you are making your payments on time, like a credit card, you see that reflected in your credit bureau.
Do we know how much they're spending? Like what the biggest proportion of money is being spent on buy now, pay later, and what they're buying?
So, obviously buy now, pay later services kind of, rose to popularity in the pandemic when people were using it to fund, buying a new wardrobe or new electronics. But increasingly, as inflation has continued to squeeze American consumers, we're starting to see them use them for necessities like groceries. We actually talked to a consumer who used Klarna to split up his grocery payments. And when he lost his job unexpectedly, he couldn't pay those back.
Are there any regulators? Are the regulators looking at this? I don't know who the regulators would be. Anywhere on the banking side. FDIC, yeah.
Well, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau 2 years ago said that they would issue guidance on whether the industry would be regulated as credit and page reported about the OCC, also warning banks that this was a potential risk. But so far, we have not seen any clear regulation on the industry.
Yeah, no substantive new regulation, to be clear, out of the CFPB, but it's been hinted and is sort of on the horizon potentially.
All right, thanks,
stuff, guys. Yeah. I mean, when I furnished the Jersey Shore estate, I went out and I was going to just throw it on their credit card, and he said, "Oh, how would you feel about 12 months interest-free loan?" I said, "Boom, hit that."
Definitely
so 12
do that.
payments. That was cool.
That makes up for your 6% 30-year fix.
Yes. Oh, definitely. That evens the books there, right there. All right, Paige Smith, thanks so much for joining us here. Paige Smith, consumer finance reporter for Bloomberg News, and Paula Cacero, personal finance reporter, Bloomberg News. Both here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, not mailing in like some people. Actually, today's been a day. Like in surveillance, we had like 6 or 7 people in the studio, including Mr. Clarida. So
Paul likes to throw a lot of shade at people who don't come in the office.
Yes.
Mostly because I don't think he necessarily wants to be in the office.
No, but I'm here every day.
But he's
every day.
Drags himself in.
All right, guys, great reporting. You can find that stuff. The big take stories are great stuff. You can read the story on the Bloomberg terminal and at Bloomberg.com/big take. Every day, Bloomberg News comes out with these really deeply sourced and well-written stories on some really compelling issues, including kind of this shadow debt out there. S&P 500, it is off 0.1%. The NASDAQ also off slightly. Well, this is Bloomberg.